Welcome to the Slob Sisters podcast, the show that explores the realistic art of modern homemaking, all of its challenges, and all of the rewards. I'm Steph, a YouTuber, stay-at-home mom, and former slob, and with me is my co-host and sister, Jill.
Hey everyone, I'm happy to be back here for another episode. I'm Jill, I'm a mom of two and poutine lover.
Yes, me as well.
Delish. So today's episode was an idea of mine. I'm really excited to dive in, but before we do, we need to do our weekly progress report where we kind of talk about an accomplishment we've done this week, big or small. So what did you get done this week, Steph?
Okay, so this week I want to give a little update about one kind of parenting I've been doing more recently, and that is doggy parenting.
Oh, yes. I've been asking for daily updates because it was touch and go for a bit there.
Yeah, so our kids, it's a very big puppy, and two of our kids are a little bit scared of her. One's come around and one hasn't, so one refuses to leave the trailer, and that makes it a little bit more hard. But one, our oldest, is like fully on board, and their youngest is like really excited, so hopefully she'll come around soon. The puppy is really nice. She just kind of, I don't know, doesn't like how big he is. I shouldn't say he, the dog is a she dog. Anyways, so my puppy parenting update is we've been taking puppy classes because I have no idea what I'm doing because I've never had a dog, and I've been watching tons of videos and stuff, and she is now able to come when she's called and sit, and I'm really proud of myself.
That's awesome. That's a good feeling. I know when I've got foster dogs, when I could teach them how to sit, it was like, yeah, you feel proud.
Yeah, I do feel proud. And now when she's like gets excited around the kids, I can be like, Gertie, sit. And she sits and she stops freaking out on them and they stop freaking out and everybody can just give her a nice pet. And she's a really nice dog. Like you can tell she's smart and she wants to please and wants to, be good. So, and she's just a puppy. She's got some wiggles still. So I try to walk her lots before the kids get up in the morning. She's like a little bit more worn out.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Yeah. But what about you?
So for me, this week was I got something done that I've been kind of thinking about doing for a while, and it was for my neighbors, actually, and it's something I tried to get you to help me with, but we never got around to
right.
it.
Well, it wasn't that I wouldn't help you. We just didn't do it in the end.
We didn't do it. I mean, it's not a great job, but my neighbors are elderly, and when we first moved into this house about 6 years ago, they took amazing care of all of their gardens. Their yard was amazing, and they have along the side of their house, beside my house, this beautiful raspberry patch, and they used to just take such good care of it. But every year I've noticed they kind of do less and less with their yards. And it's not like they don't take care of their property. I think it's just too much. And so every year or two, I kind of get out there and I clean up their raspberry, patch and weed it out. And it just gets a nice little cleanup. So I did that this last week. It feels so good because not only are they really willing to share with us these raspberries, so my kids are always out there picking the raspberries at the end of the year, but also it helps them out and makes me feel good.
That's awesome. I think that's a really thoughtful thing for you to do. And, then you can also use the raspberries, but mostly it's probably just really nice for them because, when people take like so much pride in their garden, it's probably awful for them to see it kind of go to weeds like that.
I think so. And honestly, I love weeding. I find it like therapeutic and I listen to some music and I go to, these are very prickly weeds, so it's not quite as enjoyable as some weeding is. But yeah, it's really, it feels good to get that done.
Oh, I'm proud of you. Good job, Jill.
Thank you. Both of us getting some things done, which is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to something where it feels like we're never getting anything done, but you're always working at it. Parenting. And the topic today is parenting then versus now. And this was, again, your idea. So I think you should introduce kind of why you came up with it.
Do you ever find yourself running around like a chicken with your head cut off? I mean, with your 3 kids, my 2 kids, I do this all the time. And I think, how did a mother with like 10 children in a 1 or 2 bedroom house do this with no running water or electricity? Like, sometimes I feel like parenting is so hard, and yet it seems like it should be easier than it used to be, and we tend to have way fewer children. So what are we doing differently that's making it seem so hard? And when I looked into it, it was pretty unanimous that all parents thought that parenting was harder now than it ever has been. And yet we have all of this technology and appliances and everything that should help make parenting easier. So why is it so much harder? And let's look back and see, was it harder back then? Is it easier? What are the main differences?
I think that's amazing. I mean, totally. With all of our modern stuff and our huge houses and everybody has their own bedroom, we have grocery stores that have every food on earth. Really, we have everything. Should we feel guilty about complaining how hard parenting is these days? It seems like, I don't know if I would say parenting is harder now it just seems like we're just doing the same act of taking a small baby and turning them into an adult and loving them along the way. But it does seem harder in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think a lot of when we say harder is actually more stressful. And we'll kind of dive into why I think when I did a bunch of research, parenting may seem more stressful these days than it used to be. So anyways,
Sure.
let's look back in time. Let's compare parenting today to, let's say, 1900, like just the year 1900.
So 100 years ago.
122 years ago, actually, Steph. That's the math. But
Well, you know what? It's very interesting because just this week, my husband said, do you think we should have expanded the upstairs? And I was like, of our house. I was like, why? Well, the kids could each have their own bedroom. And I keep saying this to him. And I'm like, have you seen the houses downtown? They're all wartime houses, like those little boxes. They look like bricks. I'm like, there was 8 kids in there.
yeah.
And they were fine. Our kids can share a bedroom. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, there were no iPads, there were no TVs, there was none of this to like keep kids busy. And yet, you know, these mothers are raising so many more children than we are now. So, I mean, a couple facts about what parenting looked like in the year 1900. So the average family had an annual income of $3,000, and that's in today's dollars. There would be no indoor plumbing, no phone, no car. The average house had 3.5 children. Often mothers had more children than that, but the mortality rate for infants and young kids was unfortunately very high.
Right.
Most teens did not attend school, so they worked in labor jobs, and actually only 6% of students graduated from high school. Could you imagine if that happened here now? Like if a high school gave out that stat, like what? Like it would just, so different.
That would be a problem. Well,
Yeah. So kids were expected to be almost entirely independent by the age of 3. So basically they're expected to take care of themselves for the majority of the day. So, you know, they're supposed to bathe themselves, know to like brush their teeth. They need to feed themselves.
Yeah.
You know, do they need to go to the bathroom? Like what do they need to do to stay alive without someone watching over them?
But they weren't like cooking or something, right? Like someone was preparing meals and they would come and eat the meals.
Absolutely. But basically someone's not watching over them all the time, which I know for my 3-year-old requires constant attention and supervision. Like I'm not sending him out in the streets and into the backyard and being like, okay, come back in 5 hours. Like I would get social services on my door for that. And that's a huge difference. So back then, the idea was that treating your children more like adults was to encourage them to grow up faster, and so they could start working to help out with the family. But also a big thing is to avoid spoiling your child, meaning, you know, don't hold them too much, don't kiss them too much, don't give them too much love, because then they'll be bratty, and you do not want that. That was like a huge thing. Wherever I was doing this research, it was just like, basically give your child the limited amount, like as small amount of attention as possible that they need to make them like stronger individuals. And I mean, you know,
that's what I'm doing wrong.
Yes, I was sitting there thinking like, well, those, you know, that was kind of like, people seem to turn out okay. So different there. We overparent like crazy. We'll kind of get into that. But as I mentioned before, another thing kind of happening in the year 1900 and around that area and around that time was infant mortality, a lot of diseases, influenza, cholera, things that would not just make your child, you know, mildly sick with a runny nose, but, you know, could be fatal and such things like that.
Sure. Well, it was before the invention of vaccines and even antibiotics.
Absolutely.
Right? I think that came in the 1920s.
Yeah. So fathers also...
It was around then.
Yeah. So fathers also played a very different role back then, and they were mainly there to punish and enforce rules on the children, which I think is still kind of around these days.
A little bit. Like, there's definitely still that, like, well, I don't know. I never do this, but I know when, like, we were kids, it was like, wait till your father comes home. You just wait till your father comes home, right? That kind of thing. And I know even my husband, he will talk about how he would get in trouble with his mother, and his mother would be like, go talk to your dad. And he'd have to go walk and talk to his dad and whatever.
Yeah, like the discipline was just kind of like delegated to the father, which now I think, you know, fathers have to take more of an equal role in parenting. So that's definitely different. But I thought that was really interesting. And I do remember a friend growing up, and yeah, her dad was like the discipliner, and her mom, no matter how angry her mom was at her, it was just kind of like, your dad will deal with you. I don't think I could do that. Like, I need to deal if I'm angry. I'm not going to just be like, let someone else just like deal with that. It's so funny. It's such a difference.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, another thing, and this is something we talk about, which seems hard enough as it is laundry. And I mean,
Yeah.
laundry back then was like 2 days for a load. I mean, you have
Yeah.
to wash it by hand, hang dry,
Wring it out.
ironing it. Like, it's not only time consuming, but physical as well.
Oh, there's more steps that you're missing. Like there's boiling and, bleaching and starching and yeah, all that. There it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we complain about our laundry routine now taking up a lot of time, but really, like, we are so spoiled.
What do you have to do? Move your finger to the button?
No, I use my pliers.
Right.
I use my pliers.
Oh yeah, you have to work hard because you've got pliers to turn yours on. No, definitely cleaning and all of that was a way bigger deal and a huge job.
Yeah, and I mean, there was also a lot of extra tasks family needed to do because to heat their homes, they used wood and coal stoves. They needed to tend to those. And the cleaning was just kind of nonstop because they didn't have, all of these robot vacuums and, fancy gizmos to help clean their homes. They had to, it was basically their best piece of equipment was elbow grease.
Yeah, no, definitely that part of it, the actual home care was harder than.
Absolutely. And almost all of it was put on the women, I think. So, I mean, then we look at the parenting aspect again and just that mothers were expected to take care of the children. That was their job. They'd take care of the household. They'd take care of the men, feeding them, cleaning up after them. Then when they have extra time, they help out in the field or making money as much as possible. So, women back then
Right.
did try and help out as well, making money along with all of those other things.
Sure, and not to discount what men were doing because they were working like long days in the field, and we're not talking like driving your John Deere tractor that's run by a app. It's like working the plow behind the horse. Right? These are
Absolutely.
not easy jobs either.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah, so everybody's working hard.
yeah. So why do people feel like parenting is harder now than it was before? Because when I look back, I do not think I'd want to trade places with these mothers. I mean, they're superheroes.
No, I completely agree. I love the like nostalgic feel of like the Gilded Age and like, oh, the late 1800s. And I love shows like Bridgerton from the 1700s and stuff. But I don't know. It seems like if you're not very elite, wealthy, your life is hard living.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a lot. It said depending on kind of your status in society, depended a lot on like how you parent and how your life is.
Sure. And I think, for a lot of those like higher, wealthier people, you're not even parenting at all. They have like nannies and nursemaids and things like that that are doing the work.
Yeah, which I guess is probably still around a little bit for, wealthier people now, but I don't think to the same degree.
No, and it's not expected. Like there'd still be like wealthy people now that are fully involved parents.
Absolutely.
Of course, people without the money could not have a nursemaid at
right.
all. But I think too, like, I know you're about to talk about parenting now. And it's funny because when you brought this up, I was like, I don't know, Jill. You could really offend people because parenting can be a really touchy subject. So I wanted to quickly do a disclaimer. This is not about us judging anybody or us telling you you're not doing it right. This is just us looking at the differences between parenting and then and now. And remember, we're parenting ourselves. We're struggling all the time with different parenting issues. So please just like take it as an information session and not a judgment on anyone's parenting.
Yeah, and really,
that's all I wanted to say.
we can look at that judgment as like part of why parenting is so hard now. The judgment is like one of the biggest things. Like you can't even talk about parenting without like putting out a disclaimer. It's that big of a thing for people to like take offense and like be scared to kind of say the wrong thing. I mean, I think one of the things about raising kids that's so hard these days is because of the bombardment of parenting philosophies, health guidelines, educational options that people might have different opinions on. And so you're constantly getting different information, different advice from different people, and it's really hard to kind of decide what's best for you and to sort all that information out.
Definitely. And we're living in an age now where having a different opinion from someone is no longer just like, oh, you do things differently. A lot of people feel so strongly about their opinions that they will cut people out of their lives if they feel differently.
Yeah. And I think we saw that with COVID.
It's harsh.
We won't go there.
It's harsh. No, don't go there. But no, you're right. It's a bombardment. Like I remember even just being pregnant, if I hadn't even picked up a book, the amount of advice you get, warranted or otherwise, is just out of control. And it's all of varying degrees, and it's all kind of clashes with each other, and everybody's got a different idea about how things should be done. And of course, everybody's just trying to help, and the health guidelines are just trying to make it safer for babies and everything, but it is a lot to take
Yeah,
in.
and it makes you sometimes go against your gut and what you think is best because you get this information and you worry. Like, I have found the hardest part about parenting, I'm not kidding, is the amount I worry.
Yeah.
It's constant. It's just worrying about their safety, worrying about their happiness, worrying about their nutrition, about their sleep, about, are they getting the right education? Are their friends being mean to them? We worry so much about every single part of our kids' lives now, whereas in 1900,
Right.
they were worried about, is my child alive? Great. Let's move on.
Yeah. Winning at parenting.
Yeah, it's so different. So no wonder we're feeling like overwhelmed by this parenting, and not in the physical sense, but just the stress and emotional side of parenting is so much different than it was back then. I mean, from the moment
think so, yeah.
you find out you're pregnant, it becomes overwhelming with advice, like you said. I mean, what you're going to eat and avoid during pregnancy, the choices in childbirth. Do I get an epidural? Will people judge me if I get an epidural? So should I do a home birth? Should I sleep?
Yeah.
Should I sleep train and let my baby cry himself to sleep at night? Or does that make me a bad mother? Do I potty train? At what age? Or are people going to judge me if my child's still in diapers at 3? And when should my kids go to kindergarten? There's so much. And then you look at the religious aspect, the screen time I'm not even going to go into because that's just like crazy.
Yeah.
The amount of, rules about video games, iPads, things like that. And then nutrition and exercise and outside time. It was never a thing in the 1900s. I don't know why we can't just send our kids out to play and they just don't seem to play anymore, but that's definitely a thing. I mean, there's whole Instagram and YouTube channels for entertaining your children without you because it's so hard.
Entertaining, yeah. And I think there's tons of stuff around setting up play for your children. They don't just play spontaneously, or some children won't. You have to coordinate a whole, busy box or a busy book or what are those bins full of rice?
Yeah.
Sensory bins.
Yeah, the things my cat thinks are
Devil bins,
litter boxes.
I call them devil bins because really the only fun thing to do with a sensory bin is dump it out.
Yeah, well, your kids have a special place in their hearts for making messes, so...
Yes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree there. But you're right. It's so much information, so much judgment. And like you said before, put something on Facebook and ask a question, ask it the wrong way, prepare to feel the wrath of mothers everywhere.
Yeah. And I think mothers are literally driving themselves to the brink of insanity with the lengths they'll go for their kids and their babies. And it still doesn't feel like enough. And so there's that guilt that is on every mother and father, I should say, that what you're doing is never enough.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The guilt is huge. Mom guilt is almost becoming like a chronic disease in our society. And you're right. In the 1900s, we're too busy wringing out our laundry and keeping the wood stove going. You can't have that mom guilt. And I don't know because I wasn't there. I do think there was still a lot of love, but the main goal was really to raise socially responsible people to adulthood.
Yeah.
Not the main goal was make sure they get every piece of intellectual and emotional and physical stimulation they can and join every club. And I mean, we could go on and on.
Yeah, absolutely. And another interesting thing that I did read about in terms of why we think parenting might be harder is parenting nowadays is considered a choice in the sense that some people choose to have children and some people don't. Whereas in the year 1900 and the early 1900s, you just had children.
Well, of course, pre-contraceptives.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a choice on, when are we ready to have a baby? It was, you're married, now you have children. And obviously, I'm sure there's people who couldn't conceive or what have you, and there's exceptions to everything. But generally, that's just what you did. It wasn't, I've had a child, did I make a mistake? It's like, no, that's how life works. That's kind of the next step. And so now we are able to look at our friends who have maybe chosen to not have kids, and I think, isn't that nice to do whatever you want all the time? And I have these kids dragging me down. And it's like,
sometimes you feel that way.
Not all the time. I mean, I love my kids, but having the choice that I made that I could have made the other choice to not have makes it feel hard and like extra work on my shoulders.
I get what you're saying. Like, you can always see that there's another choice that could have been made. Of course, you would never give your children back. You love your children more than anything.
You're making so many disclaimers here, Steph.
I know. You know what? You're right. The mom guilt and the judgment is so crazy.
I'm not worried
these
if
days.
people
Like,
think I love my children. I hope everyone knows
okay,
that.
I'm glad. You know what? Like, I'm going to put this out there, and I don't think I've ever talked about it. I don't talk about my kids on my YouTube channel. And a big part of it is because I want to protect their privacy. And so I don't say their names, and I don't really show them talking or anything like that. They're obviously in the background once in a while. But a big, almost bigger part of it is I don't want anybody to judge anything I'm doing with my kids because I want to do what I do, and I don't want that to come into play publicly.
Yeah, and that's fair.
So I do feel really strongly about the mom guilt and the judgment.
Yeah, if you're going to get criticized about anything on your channel, it's going to be something you do with your children.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Not how
mom channels?
not how you mop your floor.
Yeah. You know, Steph, you could turn the mop the other way. Why did you let your child do this?
And I wonder if there was any kind of sense of like comparison in like back, 100 years ago. Were moms comparing their children? I'm sure there must have been a little bit.
I think if there was like a specifically like naughty child, it would be like, oh, that poor family,
Yeah.
right? This child is creating chaos for them because, of course, kids are still kids. Kids intrinsically have not changed. They're still the same. But the nurture part of their lives has changed a lot.
Absolutely.
The nature part's the same.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've taken away almost all of the independence of kids who once used to have a lot of responsibilities. We now do. I mean, I'm guilty for it. I dress my 5-year-old almost every single day, and I'm usually fighting her to do it. A 5-year-old in the year 1900 would have to dress themselves and get ready for the day and maybe
and dress their toddler brother
and then dress their siblings and make, be out in the field picking whatever. It's crazy. And can we, change things up a little? Can I I don't want to go back to that point, but how do I give my kids a little bit of that independence back, or am I too late?
Sure. And I will say, like, in my case, I do give my kids a little bit more freedom. And I have another friend who kind of does the same as me. And we often will kind of say, like, do we let them kind of run a little bit too wild and this and that? But I say, I think what's called free range parenting now, I'm really just doing what our parents did. So I call it 90s parenting. And I'm fine. And I was safe and I was loved and we had rules and we had discipline. But this like hovering and helicoptering, I really try not to do it.
Yeah, I mean, kids have to learn from their own mistakes, not just from what they're being told from the parents, I think, a little bit, which, I mean, my husband is like, beside helicopter parent in the dictionary is a picture of him. Like,
No, he's not. He's very attentive. We do call him the helicopter.
We do
but
call
he's
him
not.
helicopter.
There is like, you could be so much worse. We do call him the helicopter. But he's very attentive to his children and other children, which is very nice when I come around because I literally know I can be like, sitting by the fire, not paying attention, and he's watching my kids.
Yes, he definitely loves all children, so that's nice. But I
Yeah.
mean, looking back at today, things that we're lucky to have that we can use tomorrow and just like be so thankful are, our microwave, our washing machine, our dishwasher, conveniences of food being right there, going
Sure.
out and
Not grinding your own grains.
exactly, or skip the dishes, even though I'm not doing
Like
that
a
anymore.
loaf of bread. Do you know how miraculous buying a loaf of sliced bread would have been?
No.
Are you kidding me? You've got to
I can't
grow the
imagine that
wheat,
being so hard.
store the grains, grind it up, grow your little yeast thing. This is now just like the stuff of bougie Instagrammers, right? This was basic necessities back then.
There's a book by Eric Carle, the guy who wrote The Hungry Caterpillar, and it's called The Seed, I think. And the son,
yeah, the little seed.
yeah,
No, the tiny
and
seed.
he goes to his mom and he says, "Mom, I want pancakes," but they live like, back whenever. And she goes, "Okay, then you need to go milk the cow. Okay, now you need to churn the milk." And he goes, "Okay, I'm ready." And she goes, "Okay, now you need to go pick the grain. And now you need to milk." It's just like all these steps. And it's like, oh my gosh, like those pancakes are so hard. Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, even funny things like ice cubes. How simple is an ice cube? Do you know how crazy that would have been to have an ice cube in your drink in the summer? You had to have an underground ice cube storage area. It was like a giant block of ice.
yeah, let alone
And that was
Bellinis.
fancy.
Come on. I will not want to trade places.
No, for sure. But I think other things that we have now is, like you mentioned, easier access to healthcare. Kids don't suffer from the things they did back in the day. Your child didn't get an illness and you were instantly like panic stricken. Go to your doctor and well, 99.9% of the time, there's a cure. There's way more emphasis on kids' emotional needs, which I do think, probably could have been paid more attention to if it's just like, don't kiss them, don't hug them. Kids love to be kissed and hugged. I don't know. I wouldn't change that one out. And then just all those kind of educational things. The 6% of kids graduating, that's kind of awful. So it's nice that, we kind of let kids be kids a little bit longer. I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Perhaps we've taken it too far. Like the overparenting is leaving us exhausted and stressed. And not only that, speaking of graduating, how many kids do you know that are still living with their parents older and older and older? And of course, there's the housing crisis and stuff like that. But what if you take that out of the picture? There's a lot of kids just living at home into their 20s because they aren't mature enough to leave.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be a balance, and who knows if that can happen now. We've just maybe taken it too far. So it's really interesting, I think, just looking back and seeing how parenting has evolved in really a very short amount of time. So it'll be interesting as, the years go on to see how things change. And I really try hard to not let the judgments of others and, the information get to me as much. I really try and use as much of my gut instincts as possible, but, that's really hard.
I think that's really good. And I mean, we've all done that Google rabbit hole, and people say don't Google your symptoms when you have something. I mean, of course, sometimes you do, but it just can send you into a terror of all the most awful things possible that things could be, right? I think there's a lot of comparison with other kids. One example I have is my daughter is homeschooled, and that was a difficult choice for me to make. She wanted to be homeschooled. I was worried there would be a social issue there. And I still feel myself having to explain myself to everyone that asks me why I homeschool, even though I feel confident in my decision for my daughter. The judgment and the comparison is really something that has to be left behind.
Yeah.
And everybody really is doing the best for their kids because they know their kids the best.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's important to remember for yourself and for others around you as well. So,
Sure.
Who do you think has had it better parenting-wise? I mean, us now with the gizmos and gadgets, but the constant pressure, or them with their washboards and 24/7 housekeeping, but just having to keep a kid alive was considered a raving success.
I mean, I do think that now we actually enjoy children for children a little bit more because we're not so busy working. At the same time, we're not letting children enjoy being children. I don't think. I think we're kind of trying to force them to grow up, trying to push them into, really competitive organized sports at age 4, stuff like that. Let these poor kids be kids, right? Let them explore the world through play on their own, be outside as much as possible. Screens are my friend, but they're not my best friend. Screens are for once in a while. I mean, we don't turn our screens on basically all summer, and I know you don't even have the internet right now, so you're not.
I don't, yeah.
And I think that's the big difference is we have the potential to enjoy parenting more, and we're squandering it on stress.
Yeah, and I mean, I do disagree with you a little bit there on that we're trying to mature kids sooner. I think we're actually doing the opposite. I think we're kind of keeping them younger than they need to be. We're not letting them be independent. I mean, yeah, we're pushing them into sports and we're getting them into all these things, but we're also, I'm wiping my 5-year-old's bum after she goes to the bathroom still. That's
so
not helping her.
Anything, we're confusing them. We're confusing them, right? You need to know multiple. Yeah, watch Baby Einstein and learn your alphabet by the time you're 2. But also, not to worry because I'm going to spoon feed you when you're 11.
Exactly. It's very confusing. Right? Yes. We have such high expectations, and yet we're not letting them kind of, grow up and take care of themselves in just those, common sense, street smart ways.
Yeah, totally. And find their way. And as much as I say that I'm a free range-ish parent, I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't let my kids hang downtown by themselves. They're 6 years old. 1900 they would.
They'd be down there. But going grocery shopping for you, that doesn't sound so bad. Well, they didn't have grocery stores.
Have you seen that show from Japan?
Yes!
Where they let a toddler go grocery shopping?
Yes, it's amazing.
So good. Yeah. And they just follow along behind. So they're safe, but it's what would the toddler do if they were doing it on their own? Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Jill, this is kind of a crazy topic to get into. Again, I'm not really sure about how I feel getting into parenting and talking about it. It is such a huge part of our lives. And it's too bad that I'm I can't even talk about parenting because someone's going to say I can't believe you said this, but it's important to talk about. So whatever you're doing out there with your parenting, you're probably doing it right.
Yeah. And as best as you can. And that's what matters. So
I was told once that if you're worried about your parenting, then you're a good enough parent.
Yeah. Are you questioning what you're doing?
If you're worrying about how good of a parent you are, then you're a good parent.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And that probably makes a lot of people feel better. So awesome, Steph. Thank you for doing this with me. I know you were a little reluctant, but I'm glad we went along with it because I think it's interesting and it's kind of fun to talk about kind of the differences and also kind of, an important topic to kind of discuss. So
fun. And it's a huge part of homemaking.
Absolutely.
Baby making.
Yes, there's that part of it too.
Not specifically that, I guess. Okay, on that note, how about time for funny story? And this week, it's your story, and I know I'm right about it.
Yeah, so I've got 2 stories. Do you want a work story or a dad story?
Well, a work story.
A work story? Okay, yeah, we've told lots of stories about our dad, so I'll save that one. So
I will say our dad has quickly become like a cult favorite on this podcast,
Yes.
so I get tons of comments about him.
He loves it. He gives me some constructive criticism too. It's great. So this only happened about a year ago. It's just a quick story and one of those classic funny ones. At work, I'm an ultrasound tech, and one of the things that we have to get patients to do often is something called a Valsalva maneuver. So if you're in medical, you'll know what that means. It's kind of tightening up the abdominal muscles, kind of bearing down, putting pressure on your lower abdomen, kind of on your pelvis and things like that. Whenever you're trying to explain this to people, I kind of, show them and I go, huh, and I kind of bear down to show them the act of kind of taking a small breath in and then pushing down. Well, I had, of course, I don't know what is with me and these young men who come in and just I don't know if I get nervous or what, but a young guy came in and I was, demonstrating the act of Valsalva, and I just let the biggest fart out as I'm showing him how to Valsalva. And it's just kind of that awkward, after as I'm sitting there looking at him yeah, just like that.
Yeah, do that.
Do that. Minus the fart or not, I guess doesn't matter. And you're trying to still act professional, but I'm just you're in this small room, there's just the 2 of you, and it's just we both want to just run away.
I don't know what just happened. Yeah. It's a tiny room. That probably rips in there.
I don't remember that part. I literally walked out and went to my coworkers and just thought, oh my gosh, you guys, I just need to quit my job. I don't know. Never be seen again by a human being. It was so awful.
The best part is it wasn't an accidental slip. You were
I was pushing it out.
Looked like you're trying to push it out.
I know. It was so awful. Thank you for recreating that. No.
Is that what it was like?
It was just...
Is that what it's like?
Yes. But I no longer demonstrate. I will just describe it to the ends of time until they finally understand. At risk of me doing that again.
Not like that. It's you just push. Oh my gosh.
They're show me how. And I'm no, I will not. Anyways,
no.
I'm sure.
You should just say, I can't show you because one time.
Oh, yeah, right. Anyways.
I totally thought this was going to a different place where you're going to say there was a pregnant woman, she pushed out and had her baby or something, but that's better.
That would be funny. That would be terrifying. I would not like that. I would like that less than farting in front of someone.
You'd be like the birthing guru. Come to Jill.
Gosh.
One push and you're
You
done.
know this guy's out there still telling the story. Just friends be yeah, and then this lady just pushed a big fart. He's gonna wonder next time he goes for an ultrasound, when's that coming? Oh gosh.
I hope it was one of your professional athletes that you scared.
Yeah, gosh. That's my story. I'm sure some of my coworkers will listen to that and you'll have a good laugh. So
yeah. Oh well, maybe it's happened to them, but probably not.
These things happen to me all the time. I don't know why. I can't figure my life out sometimes.
That's awesome. Oh, that was a good story. Loved it. Short and sweet, or I guess sour in this case.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Thanks everybody for listening. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a review and a comment if you'd like, and we will talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.